23. Upside down. God wants to turn your life upside down. I might as well tell you now. You have been dancing all around it. Jesus wants to turn your life upside down, which, as it turns out, will be right side up. He wants to turn your marriage upside down, your parenting upside down, your personal finances upside down, your career upside down, your health and well-being upside down, your school and church upside down, and so on. If you let Jesus turn your life upside down, you will be happier than you ever imagined was possible. And you wouldn't just have happiness, you will have joy. And this is what Jesus does. He radically transforms the lives of the people he encounters by rearranging their priorities. Perhaps that is why we avoid a deeply personal encounter with Jesus, because we are afraid of that radical transformation. But you will look back a few years from now on, and things you thought were so very important today, and realize that they were not, and that your new priorities have more truth, beauty, and wisdom. Throughout the Gospels, we see Jesus challenging people's priorities and in the process radically transforming their lives. Do you have a favorite story of transformation from the Gospels? The story of Zacchaeus is a wonderful and radical tale of transformation. It's a very short story, but there are some beautiful lines. It begins by telling us who Zacchaeus is, and then it says he was trying to see who Jesus was. This tells us that he was proactively seeking Jesus. He was making an effort. He was curious. Zacchaeus climbed a tree to catch a glimpse of Jesus, and Jesus called him down from the tree and invited himself to dinner at Zacchaeus' house. We are then told, so he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. There is no record of Jesus saying Zacchaeus should do this or that he must change his life. Jesus' presence was apparently enough to transform Zacchaeus, who said to him, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor, and I have defrauded anyone of anything. I will pay back 4 times as much." He didn't need anyone to tell him what he should do. His own heart prescribed the transformation that was needed. See Luke chapter 19, verse 1 to 10. Are we proactively seeking Jesus? Are we making an effort to experience him? Are we curious about him? Are we in a hurry to meet him? Are we happy to welcome him? What changes your heart prescribing for your life? The Gospels present a constant flow of people meeting Jesus. Each of them responded differently. Few responded with the unbridled enthusiasm of Zacchaeus. We could be tempted to think that the various responses were due to external circumstances, but it is more likely that the variety of responses is due of disposition of heart. We see this in the story of the 10 lepers, whom Jesus cured. They all encountered Jesus the healer, but only one returned with a grateful heart. See Luke chapter 17, verse 11 to 19. Another obvious example of radical transformation is the call of the disciples, but there were others whose response to Jesus was much more gradual. Consider the story of Nicodemus. His is not limited to one passage of the Gospels, but rather evolves over time. We first read of Nicodemus coming to Jesus in the night, presumably so that nobody would see him consulting Jesus. They conversed, and then Nicodemus said, "How can these things be?" John 3. For many people, their first encounter with Jesus was enough to bring about a profession of faith and a radical transformation. But for others, it was not. Nicodemus only had questions. People often had a deep yearning, a sense that there must be more to life, that there is some great truth that they have yet to discover. Perhaps this is what Nicodemus was experiencing when he had first approached Jesus. Later, Nicodemus tried to defend Jesus by saying to the other Pharisees, "Does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does?" John chapter 7, verse 51. Finally, we read of Nicodemus accompanying Joseph of Arimathea to ask Pilate for Jesus' body. He brought him with him 75 pounds of aloe and myrrh. Together the two men took Jesus' body down from the cross, carried it to the tomb, and wrapped it with spices and linen for burial. See John chapter 19, verse 38 to 42. One of the Christian works of mercy is to bury the dead. What Joseph and Nicodemus did here was one of the ultimate works of his mercy in history. Nicodemus did all this at great personal risk to his reputation and safety. Think of the incredible courage this would have required. What kept Nicodemus from a wholehearted embrace of Jesus? He was worried about what people thought. That is the most likely explanation for why he came to Jesus at night. He was a wise and learned man, but often it seemed the uneducated came to Jesus more willingly than the educated. What we do know is that Nicodemus had a persistent desire to seek and find the truth. Only good things can come from continually seeking truth. In each of these people who encounter Jesus, we find a piece of ourselves. Who cannot resonate in some way with the rich young man? The rich young man proactively sought out Jesus. He didn't wait for Jesus to seek him out. He approached Jesus. He was clearly trying to live a good life, and it was not Jesus who was saying, "You can do more." The young man's own heart told him this. Finally, Jesus said, "Go, sell what you own and give the money to the poor. Then come follow me." Mark chapter 10, verse 21. If Jesus asked you to do this today, could you? When the young man heard this, his face fell, and he went away sad, for he had many possessions. Mark chapter 10, verse 22. This is the only time the word sad is used in the Gospels. When we turn from Jesus and walk away, it is always a sad walk. I wonder what happened to that young man. Did he change his mind later? How long did it take for his heart to be softened? Did he become one of the first Christians? There are so many questions that the Gospels raise. So many people wander into the story for a brief moment. We just get a glimpse of their lives. We never even learn the names of any of these people. But I find myself asking questions, wondering what happened to them. We don't know what happened to Nicodemus. Did he become a Christian? Did the woman Jesus saved from being stoned, who had been caught in adultery, go and sin no more? Lazarus is another person I am fascinated with. Jesus raised him from the dead. What is it like to live on this side of death once you have experienced it on the other side? How did that change his worldview? It reminds me of a story I once heard about the twins in utero. One turns to the other and says, "I wonder if there is life after birth." The reality of life on earth is astounding when compared to life in the womb, and I suspect that in the same way, the afterlife is astounding compared to life here on earth. So what was it like for Lazarus to come from that greater reality back to this lesser reality? Did he wish Jesus hadn't raised him back from the dead? The Gospels are full of fascinating questions. There were people who embraced Jesus immediately. There were people who were slow to embrace him, and there were people who rejected him. Pilate, for example, simply could not square Jesus with his worldview, because Pilate's worldview was dominated by power, ambition, control, and the things of this world. His worldview and the heart it sprang forth from made him simply incapable of accepting the reality of Jesus. There were others who took a long time to come around. The centurion at the cross didn't realize who Jesus was until he died, when he proclaimed, "Truly, this was the Son of God." Mark chapter 15, verse 39. In the Gospel of Mark, this was the first time a human being proclaimed that Jesus was the Son of God. And the radically transformative encounters with Jesus did not cease when he died. The most famous conversion story ever is that of Saul, the Christian-hating Jew who made it his personal mission to persecute and eradicate Christians. If it had been up to Saul, every Christian would have been dead or in prison, but that all changed on a trip to Damascus. Now, as he was going along and approaching Damascus, Acts chapter 9, verse 3, we are told that Jesus appeared to Saul. He was forever transformed, changed his name to Paul, and became one of the most dedicated disciples of Jesus. It must have been an incredible experience, because Paul would suffer tremendously for the rest of his life as a result of his belief in Jesus. The Jews tried to kill him, because he publicly taught that Jesus was the Son of God. And he was imprisoned several times and spent years of his life deprived of liberty and dignity before being executed during Nero's persecution of Christians from 64 to 68 AD. Paul's transformation was radical and wholehearted. For more than 2,000 years, Jesus has been radically transforming the lives of men, women, and children in every corner of the world. But that is history. Now he wants to radically transform you and your life. Are you ready? Jesus was a radical, and he wants to have a radical impact on your life. The gospel is a radical invitation to surrender and transformation. It was radical 2,000 years ago, and it is still radical today. It is less radical to love your enemy today than it was. Is it less radical to love your enemy today than it was 2,000 years ago? It was easier. Is it easier to love your enemy today than it was then? No. Why? Because these things are personal. They are about you. They are lessons that we each must learn to embrace and live for ourselves. The gospel has had a radical impact on countless lives since Jesus walked the earth, and it is guaranteed to have a radical impact on your life if you open yourself up to it. Point to ponder. Be open. Verse to live. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and put a new and right spirit within me. Psalm chapter 51, verse 10. Question to consider. What's preventing you from making yourself available to God? Prayer. Jesus, I make myself 100% available to you today.